Me and my ex-girlfriend decided to have a date night since we both had the day off of work. So we did the usual dinner and a movie thing, and afterwards we decided we'd go for a midnight drive. So we drive about an hour and a half out of town going nowhere particular. We just knew that we were going to get it on under the stars. After scoping out a random dirt road, I took my truck down it and parked in an open area off to the side next to forest. The entire area was surrounded by forest. After about 10 minutes of kissing we decide to get down to business. So we get in the back seat and start tearing each other's clothes off. About 5 minutes in, headlights. Headlights heading towards where we were, but not directly at us. So we are both rushing in an attempt to get our clothes back on, thinking for some reason it might be the cops. Which makes absolutely no sense now. My pants are nowhere to be found and neither is her shirt. Now, keep in mind, the closest house to the road we were on is probably 30 minutes away. We kept fumbling looking for our clothing, and eventually found it and struggled to get them back on. Truck keeps getting closer, and closer. But like I said, not directly at us. Until we finally realize it's not somebody coming to yell at us to get off their property, or the cops. In fact, they can't even tell we are there because my truck is black and I'm parked almost into the thick forest area. Finally, an old beat-up F-150 parks his truck about 50 feet from us. Leaves his truck running and gets out. He walks to his truck bed, grabs his shovel, and just starts digging into the ground. He did this for a good 30 to 40 minutes while we just sat there in silence, afraid to move or speak on the off chance he hears us. He stops digging and lifts something out of the ground. It was a decent-sized object but it was too dark to see exactly what it was. Picks it up, places it in his truck bed, goes back for the shovel and places that in the truck bed as well and drives off into the night. Me and my girlfriend decides it would be best to wait another 20 minutes before we even started the truck. To this day I have no idea what it could have been, but I really hope it was, at worst, drugs. I work in the outdoor field and lead trips regularly. I once led a trip to the top of Mt. Stringer in NC. It's a tough climb to get to the top and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle school kids and had one co-instructor. We were camping out on top of the mountain and it was a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other co-instructor went to bed in their tents. I chose to spend the night in a hammock that night. I was really into a book I was reading so I stayed up and read until about 11 o'clock. I turned my headlamp off to settle in for the night. Everything around me was rather bright from the moon and from the position I was in, I could see down the trail we had hiked to get to the top. I laid there enjoying the scenery and noticed something moving on the trail. Bears are common in the area so I perked up. As it got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. I was just frozen watching this person move closer to our camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man surveyed our camp. I really could only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed like 30 minutes but may have been 10. He then turned, sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there staring at our camp. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 in the morning. Then, he stood up, took a moment to survey my camp a few minutes longer and then went back down the trail he came up on. I, to this day have no idea what that was all about but it freaked me out. I was paranoid that we were being followed for the rest of the trip. 158 Club member recounted a truly frightening story of her trip down the Pacific Crest Trail. In the 1990s I was a very accomplished camper and survival enthusiast. I enjoyed going on solo trips for 2 weeks or so, completely on my own. I would stop and hit a store, a couple hours before heading out to my destination to get some supplies and that would be it for people in my world. I would see bears, moose, wildlife but that's it. It was great spending my time reading and just traveling around. For each trip, I would take 10 to 14 disposable film cameras with me. A couple of days after one of my trips I took the cameras in to be developed. When I got them back, I was sitting with my husband at home looking through the pictures. Once I got to the 5th or 6th roll, I almost had a heart attack. I found a picture of myself sleeping at one of my campsites. I swear, I didn't see another person anywhere on that trip. She goes on to explain that she has never gone solo or camping for that matter since. Her husband could not get her to go anywhere near the woods after that. Which is probably wise. Camping alone is never a good idea. Todd and his friend Kevin went backpacking in Glacier National Park. They hiked in about 17 miles to a secluded location, set up camp, and went to bed. In the middle of the night, Todd awoke to a scratching sound. Knowing there are grizzly bear in the area, Todd and Kevin made a lot of noise in the hopes of scaring the bear away. The scratching digging noise continued. Neither Todd or Kevin was willing to get out of their tents. Then in the crisp cool mountain air came a scratchy and gravely voice that said, "You don't belong here. This is mine. You don't belong here. This is mine. You don't belong here. This is mine." The digging sound continued for a few hours. Todd and Kevin were petrified with fear. In the morning, they opened their tents to find little cereal bowl-sized holes all around their tents that were spaced about 6 apart from one another. It gave both of them the creeps, so they tore down their camp. When they were about to leave, another hiker walked up. It was one of their friends. He told them that he'd seen a Facebook post that Todd had put up about where they were going to be camping. He decided to meet up with them. Then when he found their camp, he decided to prank them with the creepiest thing he could think of. They laugh about it now, but you can see their eyes are still haunted by the fear. Last year I was with a buddy of mine and we were going to do the Hart Creek Scramble in Alberta, but due to some health conditions he has it was going too strenuous to complete, and we figured we'd make it an easy day and just do the simple trail. Now we're both climbers and have been to Hart Creek for rock climbing in the past and had a great time, so it wasn't a surprise to see the sporadic climbers on the mountainside as we went. Hart Creek is also pretty popular and easy for people who just want to go for a nice nature walk and maybe have picnic. Anyway, so we walked in, enjoying the day watching climbers on our way by. We saw a couple even doing some multi-pitch climbing, which means basically leapfrogging up the route. We settled in for lunch about a half hour later and left a couple hours after that. On our way back I remember seeing a climbing shoe in the creek and thinking, oh, someone must have lost this. I picked it up when my buddy got my attention and I looked further downstream. Both climbers, a young man, 29 or so, I learned later, and his partner were both lying the creek bed, rope and harnesses still attached, dead. It was very surreal. We had seen these people climbing not 2 hours before, making their calls, having a good time. The first reaction I had was that I remembered that there was a family right behind us, a husband and wife with a young daughter who were playing in the creek on the way down. We ran back and stopped them and explained as quietly as we could what was ahead, and before we knew it, looky-loos had come by. It turned out that the husband was an off-duty RCMP officer, and so he took control of the situation. I learned later we weren't the first on scene and that the authorities had been called. It was a very quiet ride back into town that day though.